welcome to the stage His Excellency Macky Sall.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Jacques Darmon Hunt Heron. I hope I salute in Germany. Mesdames et messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen,
chers amis,
dear friends, first of all, I'd like to thank our friend Christian Kastrop for his very kind invitation and for the warm welcome he extended to me. And I have to admit that I'm particularly happy to be here in Berlin this morning. Berlin is a historic city that has played an important role for ages already, but certainly in particular after the Second World War. If we speak about resilience, Germany is really a successful example for resilience, because 80 years ago this country was completely destroyed, and we saw and witnessed how work and dedication led to a transformation and has transformed this city from the rubbles to the first city in Europe. So I'd like to congratulate Global Solutions on organizing this summit. In a world beset by tensions and uncertainties, it is both timely and salutary to create spaces for dialogue, something that is really lacking nowadays in the world. Spaces for dialogue so that we can work together to find possible ways out of the crisis. And faced with these urgent challenges, the course of history is once again thrown into turmoil. The multilateral system, which born from the rubble of the war to promote peace, to share progress and foment solidarity between nations, this system today is showing its limits. It is struggling to provide concerted answers to contemporary challenges, and indeed, multilateral bodies seem to be at a standstill, frozen, while both old and new conflicts persist, some more disastrous than others. And terrorist threats remain unresolved across the globe. The successive COPs, we are now at the 29th, are succeeding each other, and that will take place, latest one will take place in Brazil. But yet, and despite all of that, global warming is worsening. And the world is now witnessing a major trade war, just as we were already struggling to recover from the last economic and financial crisis. And against this backdrop of crisis and profound change, Africa continues to face a number of challenges. Yes, Africa. Africa, that in history was actually divided in 1884 here in Berlin at the Berlin-Congo conference by the then powers. And Africa since has been struggling and fighting for its dignity and its development. But I will limit myself to 4 major challenges when it comes to Africa. The first challenge is the challenge of peace, security, and stability. In addition to persistent conflict situations, terrorism has a tendency of becoming endemic on our continent, particularly in the region of the Sahel. And it has to be stated that for years now, Africa has been constantly warning that traditional peacekeeping operations in Africa, United Nations-led operations are ill-suited to the fight against terrorism due to a lack of adequate mandates and resources. And the precipitous end of certain operations are a case in point. In the face of anger and incomprehension on the part of the population, we have seen that here in Mali, and we've seen the same borne out in the Congo. And this is why we have always called for more robust mandates and better calibrated resources in order to combat terrorism within the framework of the African peace and security architecture. Obviously, and this goes without saying, with the logistical and financial support from the United Nations and our partner countries. This is the price, and only at this price we will be able to defeat terrorism on the African continent, or at least significantly reduce its scope of action. It is in our common interest, because the persistence of terrorism in Africa constitutes a global threat, which falls within the remit of the Security Council of the United Nations, which is the guarantor of our collective security system. And if you witness a situation, for example, in Mali and in the Sahel, many believe that it actually has stemmed and keeps flowing from the inadequate mandates and the inadequate assignment of resources to the Sahel region. The second challenge that I'd like to mention here is the economic development challenge. With its 30 million square kilometers, its demographic weight, 1.4 billion inhabitants, and in 2015 it's projected to rise to 2.1 billion in terms of population. And with its other resources, like mineral water, we see the great rivers in Africa, the Congo, Nile, the Zambezi River, energy, fuel, gas, and coal, its mineral resources and its land resources. 60% of the planet's undeveloped arable land are in Africa. Well, with all of this richness, Africa has the potential, the required potential, to sustain its development efforts and to contribute to global growth. Obviously, this certainly calls for enlightened public policies. But this really depends also on Africans themselves. But in addition to that, it also requires a fairer and more equitable world economic order. Dynamics of development are hampered, generally, when taxes are not paid at the point where wealth is created. Where you come to a certain area, you extract resources, and then you transfer those resources and create value added somewhere else and create jobs somewhere else. And what do you leave where the resources come from? Well, empty holes and poverty. And this also has a link to migration flows. So, the reform of international tax systems is another problem that is important and on the top of our minds. So we've already said it. Dynamics of development are hampered by the taxes that are not paid, where wealth is sanctioned. So these are abusive, and they have been included in legislation and legislative frameworks in all of these countries and create a framework for the extraction and transfer of resources. And the other problem that we have in Africa is the rating agencies and their rating of African countries.
avec les méthodologies
It is
qui sont d'ailleurs de plus en plus contestées.
based on methodologies that are increasingly contested.
En Afrique, la perception du risque, en réalité,
Why? Because
est
in
souvent supérieure
Africa,
au risque
the
lui-même.
perception of risk is often higher than the actual
Je le
risk
dis souvent, les pays
on the
africains
ground.
ont
I've
toute cette
I've said it
situation,
time and again.
remboursent leurs dettes.
African countries, despite the situations, repay their debt, even though the interest rates are extremely high, and
Donc pourquoi il y a un risque?
despite all of that, they
Cette
continue
perception de risque et
serving
cette
their debt.
notation renchérit
So this perception of risk and this rating creates a higher
qui viennent
cost
en
for
plus
credit because it creates an extra fee that is added, a risk premium that is added to the already high interest rates. And that is why Africa is strangling on debt, and that is why debt is accumulating and accruing in
Il est temps
Africa.
de refonder
Therefore,
la coopération
in my view, it is time to refound international cooperation on newly founded paradigms
la réforme de la
as follows. First of all, reform of international tax systems. I've already talked about this before, but ever since it has been mentioned in the past, we haven't seen any progress. We
sur toutes les activités,
should have an international tax on transactions of 4%, irrespective of the countries, in Europe or elsewhere. If we in Africa were able to had a 15% tax rate in order to tax all of those transfers, we would not even require any credits. We would have an equitable system, and we would be able to participate in the international trade system
dans ce paradigme à réinventer,
at the same level.
c'est la question de l'assouplissement.
And the other question is also
Je l'ai plaidé plusieurs
the
fois.
relaxation of OECD rules. I've actually mentioned that, and I also salute the developments that have been undertaken within the OECD, but the rules are very, very rigid when it comes to export credits. When you speak to the parties involved, they say, well, this is not up to us, but what we say, if the countries were able to have more extended credit lines, I speak about, for example, Senegal, where we had a credit for a hydroenergetic project. But we required financing actually of more than 10 years because a hydro dam, for example, has actually a service life of between 80 and 100 years. So you need more extended lines, 25, 50 years, for a project